Mystery of Mystery, a primer of thelemic ecclesiastical Gnosticism. Authors Sabazius X, USGL of OTO, and Tau Helena. Herme, the Arcadian messenger god. Known in Roman mythology as Mercury, he was the son of Zeus and Maia, born on Mount Selene. He was the father of Echion, Autolycus, and Daphnis, and, by some accounts, of Pan. He was a deity of travel, trade, commerce, ingenuity, manual skill, athletics, eloquence, and oratory, of the wind and of speed, the patron of travelers, prophets, soothsayers, and magicians. Herme corresponds to the Egyptian god Thoth or Tahuti as the inventor of writing, and as Hermes Psychopompos to Anubis as guide of the souls through the underworld. Hermes is also the god of stones, cairns, and boundaries, and was associated with certain phallic stone monuments called herms. Earlier in the book, we learned that phallic means a tubular shape indicating power, be it electricity or the ability to do something. Hermes was usually depicted as a youthful, athletic male deity, unclad or clad only in short chlamys, with a round winged hat and winged sandals, and bearing the caduceus, a rod, sometimes winged, with twining ribbons or snakes, and a pouch. One Latin title for Hermes was the universal column supporting all things. His sacred animal was the crane. Hermes is often portrayed as a prankster, his most famous prank being the theft of Apollo's cattle on the day of his birth. When Apollo discovered the theft, Hermes placated his anger by offering to return the remaining cattle. He had sacrificed 2 of them to the 12 gods, including himself, and singing Apollo's praise while accompanying himself on the lyre, which he had just invented. Apollo was so taken with the beauty of the music that he offered to trade the stolen candle for the lyre. Hermes accepted the offer, then cut some reeds, bound them together, and played a few more tunes for Apollo on his newly invented shepherd's pipe. Apollo was again enchanted by the music and offered to trade his golden herdsman's staff for the pipe. Hermes reluctantly accepted the offer, but only on the condition that he be instructed in the art of prophecy as well. Apollo took Hermes to Olympus, where Hermes was accepted among the gods. Despite his malicious pranks, or perhaps as a result of them, he was the only one of Zeus's illegitimate children who immediately found favor with Hera. Zeus proclaimed him his personal herald and invested him with the insignia of his office: his round hat, his winged sandals, and a winged herald staff twined with white ribbons. Hermes pledged that, as a herald of the Most High, Al-Ali, he would give up telling lies, but he could not promise always to tell the whole truth. Hades also proclaimed Hermes his herald. to summon and conduct the souls of the dying to the underworld, as a sign of Hermes' association with Hades, and his role as Psychopompos, conductor of souls. The white ribbons of his herald staff were transformed into twinning serpents, the ancient emblem of dead souls. Hermes developed the musical scale and assisted the three fates to compose the alphabet. He created the science of astrology, founded the art of boxing and gymnastics, invented weights and measures, and taught the cultivation of the olive tree and the making of fire by the twirling of fire sticks. Hermes, as a saint of EGC, may also refer to Hermes Trismegistus, or thrice great Hermes, the legendary Egyptian founder of Hermeticism, corresponding to the Egyptian god Thoth, or Thoth. Hermeticism was a non-Christian form of Gnosticism which emerged in Egypt in the 2nd through 4th centuries and which produced a voluminous body literature called the Hermetica, including the Tabula Smardina, or Emerald Tablet of Hermes, which is the source of the famed magical aphorism, "That which is above is as that which is below," or "as above, so below," and the divine Pymander, which is included in Section 1 of the AA reading list. Hermeticism had a considerable influence on the development of alchemical philosophy. References: Barrett Francis, De Magus; Bulfinch Thomas, The Age of Fable; Forlong, J.G.R., Faiths of Man; Graves Robert, The Greek Myth, Volume 1; Geron F., Greek Mythology; Mead, G.R.S., The Gnosis of the Mind; Mead, G.R.S., Thrice Great Hermes; Ovid, Metamorphosis; Pouvel, Jean, Comparative Mythology; Randolph, Paschel, Beverly, Hermes Mercurius Trismegistus; Yamachi, Edwin, Pre-Christian Gnosticism, Tyndale Press, London, 1973; Zimmerman, J.E., Dictionary of Classical Mythology. The next saint is Ban, also known as Aristeus or Agipon, goatherd, known in Roman mythology as Faunus or Silvanus, son of Hermes and Diope or Penelope, the Arcadian god of flocks and shepherds, of trees, forests, of wildlife, of the hot noonday stillness, Dhuhr, and of freedom and fertility, playful, lascivious, unpredictable, and lecherous. He is depicted as human, but with the ears, legs, hooves, tail, horns, and beard of a goat. Some say he dwelt underground. He was fond of music, and is often shown bearing the syrinx or panpipes. Syrinx was a wood nymph who fled Pan's lecherous advances by changing herself into a reed. Not sure that would stop it. The Orpheans associated Pan with Dionysus Zagreus. Herodotus places his birth, in essence, his appearance in Greece at circa 1200 before the Common Era. But some legends portray him as very ancient, even as the foster brother of Zeus. Pan was a solitary god who wandered among the heaths and woods, and dwelt on mountains and in caves. As a spirit of nature, Pan could inspire terror, especially in solitary wanderers in the wilderness at night. This is the origin of our word panic. In Greek, the word pi alpha nu means all. and the Orpheans conceived of Pan as a symbol of the universal, a personification of nature. Both Pangenitor, all begetter, and Panphage, all devourer, in this aspect is portrayed in Tarot Trump 15. Pan is also said to have seduced the nymph Echo, upon whom he sired Lynx, or Enush, and the moon goddess Selana by transforming himself into a white ram and luring her into the forest. In a note he made in his personal copy of Liber 15, Crowley commented on the statement that the priestess should be actually vertigo intacta, or specifically dedicated to the service of the Great Order. His comment stated that the priestess should be sworn to the great work as Artemis to Pan. Plutarch, Obsolescence of Oracles, relates the story of how, during the reign of the Roman Emperor Tiberius, 14 to 37 of the Common Era, the passengers of a merchant ship traveling from Greece to Italy heard a loud cry from the Isle of Paxos. The voice called the name of the ship's pilot, Thamos, 3 times. Thamos, Thamos, Thamos. Then instructed him to announce that the great Pan was dead when the ship approached Palodes. When he did as the voice had commanded, the passengers of the ship heard a great lamenting of many voices. Christian theologians have cited this story as an example of the triumph of Christianity over paganism. But the passengers of the ship may simply have heard part of a mystery ritual of the dying god Tammuz. Ya Tammuz, Ya Hussein. Tammuz, Tammuz, Tammuz. Damuzi, Damuzi, Damuzi. Al-Akbar, Semot. References: Benton William, Publisher, Encyclopedia Britannica, Bullfinch Thomas, The Age of Fable, Forlong, J.G.R., Faiths of Man, Geron F., Greek Mythology, Graves Robert, The Greek Myths, Herodotus, The Histories, Ovid, Metamorphosis, Plutarch, The Obsolescence of Oracles, De Defecto Oraculorum, translated by Frank Cole Babbitt in Plutarch's Moralia, Volume 5, Loeb Classical Library, Harvard University Press, Cambridge, Massachusetts, 1969. Priapos, prehistoric mythic, also known as Lutinus, Fecundus, and Mutunus, son of Aphrodite and Dionysus, or Adonis, or Hermes, or Pan, or Zeus, according to other accounts, maybe all of them in incarnations over many, many lifetimes. The Mycenaean god of creative fertility in nature and in man, sometimes identified with both Hermes and Pan. He presided over the fertility of fields and flocks, beekeeping, viticulture, and fishing. By some accounts, he was included among the retinue of Dionysus. Priapos is usually depicted as a grotesque little man with an unnaturally large phallus, not always erect, and a bucolic grin. In latter Roman times, he was depicted simply as a phallus. His statue was often kept in gardens as a fertility talisman and to scare away thieves. His sacred animal was the ass. References: Forlong, GJR, Faiths of Man, Garon F. Greek Mythology. Knight Richard Payne, A Discourse on the Worship of Pupils. Sullivan, J.P. and Peter Wigham, editors, Epigrams of Martial, Englished by diverse hands. Gnostic Saint Osiris, also known as Asar, Osir, also known as Asar, Usar, and Serapis. Originally a fertility god, Osiris developed into the Egyptian god of resurrection, lord of the underworld, son of Seb or Geb and Nut, consort of Isis, Asi, and gnome god of Abydos, Abdu, now Nag Hammadi. Identified by the Greeks with Dionysus, Adonis, and Hades. Osiris is depicted as a human male with green skin, wearing the Atif crown, wrapped in mummy's bandages, with his hands protruding, holding a crook against his left shoulder with his left hand and a flail against his right shoulder with his right hand. His sacred animal is the bull, and his sacred color is black, the sacred color of Set. His brother and enemy is red. The formula of Osiris is Yod, Elif, Love. See part 3 of The Heart of the Master. According to legend, Osiris was born in Thebes, the son of the earth god Geb and the sky goddess Nut. And a loud voice proclaimed at his birth the coming of the universal Lord. He was recognized by his grandfather Ra as the heir to his throne, which he assumed after his father Geb retired to the heavens, taking his sister Isis as his queen. Osiris was a just and well-loved ruler and lawgiver of Egypt. His brother Set, god of the desert, envied his power and favor and contrived to entrap him. While Osiris was abroad with his advisor Tahuti, instructing the men of other lands in agriculture and religion, his wife Isis ruled Egypt in his place. Set took advantage of Osiris's absence to make a sarcophagus of the precise dimensions to accommodate his brother's body. Traveling in those days was dangerous. He may have died. Set then arranged for a great feast in honor of his brother's return. After all had their fill of drinks, Set produced a richly ornamented sarcophagus and offered possession of it to anyone who could fit inside of it. Osiris, of course, accepted the offer, and as soon as he had laid down or been laid down in the sarcophagus, Set slammed the lid shut, locked it, and with the assistance of his 72 comrades, hauled it off and threw it in the Nile, which carried it away. Set then reclaimed the throne of Egypt. I am an advocate of Set. When I read this, I hear that that King Osiris leaving with Tahuti, who in Arabic is known as Khidr, he actually left his wife for a long time and his obligations at court and went traveling for many, many years. And it seems returned dead. And so this story here tells the mourning of a brother. He threw a repast for his brother. They ate and ate, and of course the only one who could fit in the sarcophagus was his brother. He either had word that he had died or that he would die. Or that he assumed he would return dead from his travels, and he did return dead. He was not alive at this repast. He was already under. And so when he was placed in the sarcophagus, it was as if placing anyone in a sarcophagus, making Set the first one to place a person who had been a king in a sarcophagus, lock it, and ensure his body could not be harmed. At least it appeared that way. After a lengthy search, and the reason why in the Nile River is because none of the people could agree where he should be buried. He was so beloved. So it said that he was thrown in the Nile so that the river would decide itself which part of Egypt or beyond he would eventually be found, or he would eventually lie. The Nile River undulates, so theoretically he would keep moving and probably shoot out into the Mediterranean Sea. After a lengthy search, Isis recovered the sarcophagus and hid it away. Set, however, discovered it. He seized the body of Osiris, cut it into 14 or 16 pieces, and scattered them all over Egypt, thus solving the concern over where to bury him. Isis set forth in a reed boat to recover the pieces, she believing that this was a body desecration and you should actually keep the body all together. A philosophical dispute, and succeeded in finding all but one, the phallus. This could either be the penis or it could be his masculinity, his virility, his soul. She found all his body pieces, but he still was not alive, which had been devoured by a fish. With the assistance of her sister Nephthys, her nephew Anubis, and Tahuti, she reassembled them, binding them together in the wrappings of a mummy. Isis then begat a son, Horus, by lying on top of the body of her dead husband. It may be that she had a way to inseminate herself, but with another man's seed, even Set. But in Egypt, the father was the one you lay with, and it's unlikely that Set and Isis lay with each other. To avenge the death of his father, Horus set out to make war against his brother, Uncle Set. The battle was fierce, and Set tore out the right eye of Horus. Nevertheless, Horus availed in the end. But as he was about to kill his enemy, Isis intervened and allowed Set to escape. Enraged, Horus severed his mother's head, which Tahuti replaced with the head of a cow. Horus claimed the throne of his father, which had been stolen by Set, according to law. Then resolved to find his father's corpse and restore him to life. Under the direction of Tahuti, he recited a series of incantations over his father's body and embraced him, transferring to him his own vitality. He then gave him his eye, which Set had previously torn from his face. Conveniently, upon eating the eye, Osiris recovered his consciousness and arose as monarch of the dead and lord of the underworld. This, in modern day, or in latter day practice, is called the baptism of the dead, a way to raise them from limbo and place them in their proper place in the next world. According to Forlong, the worship of Osiris included the presentation of sacred cakes called mest, along with a sacred wine cup. References: Budge, Sir E.A. Wallace, The Gods of the Egyptians; Bullfinch, Thomas, The Age of Fable; Crowley, Alistair, The Heart of the Master; Forlong, J.G.R., Faiths of Man; Herodotus, The Histories; Meyer, Marvin W., The Ancient Mysteries, a source book; Nagal, or Nail, Georges, The Mysteries of Osiris in Ancient Egypt; Plutarch, on Isis and Osiris, De Isde et Osiradi; Viond J., Egyptian Mythology, Zimmerman, J.E., Dictionary of Classical Mythology. Our next saint is Melchizedek. Blessings be upon all the priests of the order of Melchizedek. Priest king mentioned in Genesis 14:18 through 20. After having served as priest to Abraham, and Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God, El Elyon, or Elyon. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abraham of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand. And he gave him tithes of all. Melchizedek is mentioned in Psalms 1:10. CXI. In connection with the ordination of a high priest by a king of Jerusalem in the line of David, the Lord hath sworn, and will not repent, Thou art a priest forever, after the order of Melchizedek. Poke. The Geneva Bible, including the marginal notes of the Reformers, 1587 version, Psalm 110, a Psalm of David. The Jesus Christ in Matthew 22:44 gives the interpretation of this, and shows that this cannot properly be applied to David but to himself. The Lord said unto my Lord, Sit thou at my right hand, until I make thine enemies thy footstool. The Lord shall send the rod of thy strength out of Zion. Rule thou in the midst of thine enemies. And then it will stretch through all the world, and this power chiefly stands in the preaching of his word. Thy people shall be willing in the day of thy power, and the beauties of holiness from the womb of the morning. Ar-Rahman. Thou hast the dew of thy youth. By the word your people will be assembled into your church. Increase will be anointed, wonderful, drops of the Lord hath sworn, and will not repent. Thou art a priest forever, after the order of Melchizedek. As Melchizedek, the figure of Christ, was both a king and priest, so this effect cannot be accomplished on any king save only Christ. The Lord that is at thy right hand shall wound kings in the day of his wrath. He shall judge among the heathen. He shall fill the places with the dead bodies. He shall wound the heads over many countries. No power will be able to resist him. He shall drink of the brook in the way, therefore shall he lift up the head. Under this comparison of a captain that is so eager to destroy his enemies that he will not scarce drink by the way, he shows how God will destroy his enemies. In the book of Hebrews, this same order of priesthood is claimed for Jesus. And the following is said of Melchizedek in Hebrews 7:1-3. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom also Abraham gave a 10th part of all, first being by interpretation king of righteousness, and after that also king of Salem, which is king of peace, without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like unto the Son of God, abideth a priest continually. There appears to have been a school of Gnostics known as Melchizedekians, who revealed Melchizedek as an avatar of Seth, third son of Adam, and Shem, second son of Noah, progenitor of the Semitic peoples. A Gnostic tractate included in the Nag Hammadi library bears the name of Melchizedek. The tractate elaborates on the role of Melchizedek as eschatological high priest, messianic warrior, and previous incarnation of Jesus Christ. The name Melchizedek can be translated as righteous king, or my king is justice. Melchizedek was the king of Salem, and Salem was probably Uru Selim, an old name of Jerusalem, whose king during the Israelite invasion of Canaan had the strikingly similar name of Adonizedek. As the priest of Abraham, Melchizedek can be considered the progenitor of the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and their derivatives. Based in Genesis 14:18, he is sometimes credited with having substituted the sacrifice of bread and wine for that of animals. Many sacerdotal lineages, including the Roman Catholic, Mormon, and Messianic royal arch, are traced in legend to Melchizedek. For various reasons, many historians believe that Genesis 14:18-20 was inserted into the book of Genesis at a later date, maybe because it was found then, or possibly to help justify the ordination of non-Levite. Again, Levi would have been born after Isaac, and Melchizedek would have been born well before Levi. Oh, and I am of the house of Levi. For various reasons, many historians believe that Genesis 14:18-20 were inserted into the book of Genesis at a later date, possibly to help justify the ordination of a non-Levite high priest by David. Also, it should be kept in mind that Jerusalem in the time of Abraham was inhabited by the Jebusites, a tribe of Canaanites, which probably descended from the Hittites and Amorites. As priest king of the Jebusites, Melchizedek would certainly have been a polytheist, and deities named El-On and Zedek are both to be found in the Canaanite Phoenician pantheon. El-On also is Heliopolis, the city of Ra. So this may have been our Lord King Ra, or Horus the Elder. The name Melchizedek, or he could have been the Pharaoh of Egypt. The name Melchizedek could be translated, my king is the god Zedek, or my king is justice. Aside from historical questions, the Hebrew word Salem means peace. Thus, Melchizedek, king of Salem, could be interpreted king of righteousness, king of peace. The Hebrew word Zedek, justice or righteousness, is also the name of the planet Jupiter, Guru. Thus, in a Kabbalistic sense, Melchizedek the Jovian priest king of righteousness and peace, is the embodiment of the divine image of the Sephirah Chesed, chaste. A priest forever after the order of Melchizedek, who gave it to Abraham, who gave it to Isaac, who gave it to Jacob, who gave it to, by way of a son of Levi, to Levi, would thus be a fitting description for an adaptus exemptus. And Levi may adopt and give the priesthood to those whom they adopt, even if they are not of the household. So saith Chabad. References: the Bible, Authorized Edition, Jackson Samael Macaulay, The New Chef Herzog Encyclopedia, Mackenzie Kenneth, The Royal Masonic Cyclopedia, McKay Albert G. Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, MacDonald William J. New Catholic Encyclopedia, Robinson James M. The Nag Hammadi Library. The next saint is Shem, prehistoric mythic, also known as Min. Amintu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Archem, Egyptian Ithyphallic fertility god and gnome god of Panopolis, Apu, near present-day Akhmim. The Greeks identified him with Pan. Shem is depicted as a human male wearing a crown with two tall ostrich plumes, with the right hand raised behind his head, holding a flail, the left hand hidden, and with a prominent erect phallus. He represents the power of generation. And was considered the god of the harvest and protector of crops. His sacred animal was a white bull. Shem was also the native name for Egypt. It means black, and referred to the fertile, black soil of the Nile Valley. Linguistically and ethnologically, Shem is equivalent to Ham of the book of Genesis 9 and 10, the youngest son of Noah, Nuh, and the progenitor of the Egyptians, Nubians, and Canaanites. This saint was italicized in 1919 of the Common Era version of the list, but not in the 1929-30s Common Era version. References: Budge, Sir E. A. Wallace, The Gods of the Egyptians, Furlong, J.G.R., Faiths of Man, A Cyclopedia of Religions, Viand, J., Egyptian Mythology, and the New Laos Encyclopedia of Mythology. Saint Amun, prehistoric avenger, also known as Amun, or Amman, Amun, and Amen. Amen. Egyptian god, known as King of the Gods and Lord of Heaven, associated with the West. Gnome god of Thebes, Uast, near present-day Us. Consort of Hathor, or of Mut, and father of Honsu. Alayhi salam. The Romans identified him with Jupiter. The name Amun means hidden. Amun was the vassal of Mentu until he displaced him as the principal god of Upper Egypt, later becoming identified with the sun god under the name Amun-Ra, or Am-El-On, Allah. Am, am al is usually am al an, am al an, am al an is usually depicted as a human male clad in an apron and breastplate, wearing a crown with two ostrich plumes, holding a phoenix wand in his left hand and an ankh in his right hand. He is also occasionally depicted as the potter with the wheel, fashioned the primal egg of generation, or, like Krishna, as a black lingam. His sacred animals were the ram and the goose, the Hebrew exclamation, Amen, verily, innani, probably derived from the Egyptian custom of taking oaths in the name of Amun. Innani ana Allah, la ilaha illa ana, fa'abudni wa aqim salat li dhikri. In Isaiah 65:16, the God of truth is in Hebrew Elohi Amen. Shema Yisrael, Yeshua Elohu Anu, Yahuwah Ehad. References: Budge, Sir E. A. Wallace, The Gods of the Egyptians, Furlong, JGR, Faiths of Man, The Old Egyptian Mythology. Our next site is Mintu, prehistoric mythic, also known as Menthu, Monthu, and referred to as the Lord of Thebes. Also known as Methuselah, son of Enoch, grandfather of Noah. The Greeks identified him with Apollo and Ares. Menthu is depicted as a male deity with a falcon's or bull's head, clad in an apron, wearing a crown with a disc and two tall ostrich plumes, holding a phoenix wand in his left hand and an ankh in his right hand, or brandishing a scimitar. His sacred animal was the bull, Ankh of Nahonsu, one of Crowley's claimed previous incarnations, whose funerary tablet served at the Stella a Revealing, was a priest of Mentu. Budge, Sir E. A. Wallace, The Gods of the Egyptians, Furlong, JGR, Faiths of Man, Veon, J. Egyptian Mythology. Heracles, or Hercules, known in Roman mythology as Hercules, and in Phoenician Carthaginian mythology as Melkarth, or Melkor, the elf. Theban Greek hero and demigod, elf, son of Zeus and the mortal, son of Zeus and the mortal, Alcmena, whom Zeus seduced by taking the form of her husband, Amphitryon, who may have taken the god form of Zeus. The mightiest and most famous of the heroes of Greek mythology, comparable to the Hebrew Samson and the Hindu Indra and Arjuna, Hercules is credited for founding the Olympic Games. He was considered a saint by the Stoics for his example of obtaining ultimate deification through enduring the ordeals of the world. His symbols are the two pillars, the club, the apple, the cornucopia, and the lion's skin. though this is January 1, 2021, we will be having the Tokyo Olympics in Japan this August. Because he was hated by the jealous Hir. Whether this is Hera, a singularity, or the Hir, the elves, wife of Zeus. The church is a bride adorned for her husband. The life of Heracles was fraught with ordeals, over which his tremendous strength generally enabled him to prevail. Hera began to persecute her namesake. Hera began to persecute her namesake even before his first breath. She delayed his birth and sent 2 serpents to kill him while he was just a babe in the cradle. But he seized them in his tiny but powerful hands and strangled them. In a fit of insanity caused by Hir, Heracles slayed his own wife and children. In atonement for this atrocity, he offered himself as a slave to Eurystheus, king of Mycenae. Eurystheus enjoined Heracles to accomplish the famous 12 labors, comparable to the 12 labors of the Sumerian, or Samari, Gilgamesh, for which he was outfitted by the various gods of Olympus. The 12 labors were killing the Nemean lion, which could not be killed by stone or metal, and whose skin he wore thenceforward. Killing the Lernaean hydra, which grew 2 new heads for each head it lost. The only way to kill them was by joining them. Capturing the golden-horned Cernian stag, capturing the Erymanthian boar, cleaning the Augean stables, that place which provides alguedes, killing the deadly iron-feathered Stymphalian birds, capturing the man-eating mares of Diomedes, capturing the Cretan bull, obtaining the girdle of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons, or the Valkyries, stealing. Maybe he attended her wedding and they threw it back to him. Stealing the oxen of Heron, during which exploit the pillars of Heracles were created, obtaining 3 golden apples from the garden of Hesperides, or Ithun in Norse mythology, the most difficult of the labors, and bringing Cerberus to earth from the underworld, the most dangerous of labors, the most dangerous of the labors. I am inspired to ask for New Year's blessings on the royal family of Serbia. After completing the 12 labors, Heracles obtained his freedom from Eurystheus and married Deianira, daughter of Dionysus and Althea. One day while traveling, Heracles and Deianira came to a river where the centaur Nisus was carrying people across for a fee. Heracles crossed on his own, leaving Deianira for Nisus to carry after him. When Heracles had crossed, he looked back and saw that Nisus had run away with his wife. He gave chase and shot Nisus with an arrow. The dying centaur told Deianira to take his blood-stained shirt as a charm to preserve her husband's love for her. Eventually, Deianira began to doubt her husband's devotion and decided to present him with the shirt. When Heracles put on the shirt, the residues of the blood of Nisus permeated his body and burned him like acid. He tore at the garment in a vain effort to relieve his agony, but it held fast to his skin, causing him to tear his own flesh to shreds. Mortally wounded, he ascended Mount Etna and built himself a funeral pyre, laid himself upon it, and commanded his friends to set it on fire. The gods were troubled by the demise of one of their favorites, but Zeus encouraged them by explaining that Heracles was half divine, and only the human side of him could die. The divine half of Heracles was taken up to Olympus, and Hera, now reconciled with him, gave him her daughter Hebe in marriage. The saint was italicized in 1929-30 Common Era version of the list, but not in the 1918 Common Era version. References: have been mentioned before. Next saint is Orpheus, circa 1200 before the Common Era, an Avenger. Thracian hero and demigod, son of Oeagrus, some say Apollo, and Calliope. Priest of Dionysus, the most famous of the musicians and poets of Greek mythology, the quintessential bard. His masterful singing and music upon the lyre could tame wild animals and move even stones and cliffs. Orpheus journeyed with Jason and the Argonauts on their voyage into the Black Sea in pursuit of the Golden Fleece, where he performed many miracles with his singing, such as charming the Argo down to the sea from the sand dune where it was beached, calming the moving rocks that would otherwise have crushed the ship and its crew, and lulling to sleep the dragon which guarded the Golden Fleece. Orpheus married a nymph called Eurydice, to whom he was passionately devoted. One day, Pan, in the form of the beekeeper Aristeus, spied Eurydice in the forest and pursued her. While fleeing from him, Eurydice was bitten on the heel by a snake. She died and passed into the underworld. Stricken by grief and finding no satisfaction from his prayers to the gods, Orpheus descended via a cave into the underworld to retrieve her. By the power of his music, he induced Hades and Persephone to allow Eurydice to return with him to the world of the living, but Hades added the condition that he must not look back or she would remain with Hades forever. As he led her from the underworld, he could not help but turn to assure himself that Eurydice was following him, and so lost her. He returned to Thrace alone. The women of Thrace, perceiving that Orpheus was now available, tried their best to win him, but he repelled their advances. They tolerated his aloofness as long as they could, but one day No longer able to bear this insult to their feminine powers, they attacked him and tore him to pieces, throwing his head and lyre into the river Hebros, even the Jordan. The Muses gathered up the scattered pieces of his body and buried them at Lai-Bethra. Zeus took his lyre and placed it among the stars, and his head, singing Eurydice's name, floated down the Hebros and into the Aegean Sea. Eventually his head arrived on the coast of Lesbos, where it lodged in a fissure in a rock. It remained there for many years, delivering oracles. Some versions of the myth say that the Thracian women were maenads of Dionysus, and that Dionysus commanded them to tear Orpheus to pieces because he had begun to worship Apollo Helios. His Thracian origins, his devotion to the Muses, his descent to and return from Hades, and his death by dismemberment show Orpheus to be a human reflection of his god Dionysus, and are the fundamental reasons for his designation as patron of the Greek mysteries. Orphism was the first of the organized Hellenic mystery schools, and one of the earliest of the fully developed religious metaphysical systems. It developed in the 6th century before the Common Era and was centered around the teachings attributed to Orpheus as transmitted by a priest named Onomakritos. These were set forth primarily in 24 books of invocatori, hymns, and included the cosmogony described under Dionysus. Orphism was a mythical redemption religion based on the allegorical worship of the heavenly bodies, which emphasized the need to separate Dionysiac spirit from the Titanic matter. The avowal of the Orphic initiate included the clause, "I am a child of earth and heaven, but my race is of heaven alone." The Orpheans lived in small communes and followed an ascetic lifestyle. Their ascetic practices, including vegetarianism, were intended to symbolize the rejection of the titanic side of the nature of man, and to ultimately liberate his spirit from the tomb of the body and the sorrowful wheel of generation. Orphism adopted and refined the order Dionysian and Orphism adopted and refined the older Dionysian and Bacchic rites, retained their sacramental and initiatory symbolism and ecstatic mysticism, but tempering their savage frenzy. They replaced the old Dionysian homophage, the ritual devouring of the raw flesh of the bull, fawn, or goat sacrificed to Dionysus, with the offering and consumption of cakes of meal and honey, in commemoration of the slain Son of God. Orphism was influential on the thoughts and works of Heraclitus, Plato, Aeschylus, Sophocles, Pindar, and Virgil, and Pythagoras was an Orphic initiate. O sister of Inki, Isa, Isa, Isa. References: Angus S., The Mystery Religions, a study in the religious background of early Christianity, 1925-1928. Bullfinch Thomas, The Age of Fable, de Etienne Marcel, Orpheus in the Encyclopedia of Religions, Medicea et la Eliade, Editor-in-Chief, Macmillan Publishing Co., 19 1987, New York. Forlong, JGR, Fates of Man, Graves, Robert, The Greek Myths, Guiron F., Greek Mythology. Harrison, Jane, Themis. Mead, GRS, The Orphic Pantheon, Ovid, Metamorphosis, Pouval, John, Comparative Mythology, Webb, James, The Occult Underground, Villy, Walter, The Orphic Mysteries and the Greek Spirit, Zimmerman, J.E., Dictionary of Classical Mythology. Odysseus, circa 1200 before the Common Era, Avenger. Known in Roman mythology as Ulysses, or Ulysses, Greek hero, king of Ithaca, son of Laertes, some say of Sisyphus, and Anticlea, husband of Penelope, a leading hero in the Trojan War. He proposed the idea of the Trojan horse. In contrast to the physical strength of Heracles, Odysseus' heroism was a result of his wit and cunning. The exploits of Odysseus during the Trojan War and his 10-year-long circuitous return thereafter to Ithaca and his wife Penelope are detailed in the Iliad and the Odyssey of the greatest of Greek poets, Homer. Circa 850 before the Common Era. The story of Odysseus includes such well-known tales as the Trojan horse, the Narcotize lotus eaters, the blinding of Polyphemus, the sorceress Kirke, Circe, who turned his men into swine or made them face rebirth, the song of the sirens, Scylla, and Charybdis, and the suitors of Penelope. The following is a brief paraphrase of one of his adventures, his capture by and escape from the Cyclops Polyphemus. Odysseus and his men had stopped at the island where Polyphemus lived, hoping to restock their boat with provisions. They explored the island and discovered a large cave containing a great store of food. Polyphemus presently returned to his cave, driving in his herd of sheep and blocking the entrance behind him with a huge stone. While milking his sheep, he noticed the intruders. Odysseus politely asked Polyphemus for hospitality in the name of the gods. Polyphemus rather impolitely responded by seizing 2 of his men and devouring them, then stretching out on the floor of the cave and falling asleep. Though tempted to kill the giant as he slept, Odysseus realized the futility of such a course of action, since the stone blocking the entrance to the cave was far too large to be moved by men. The next morning, Polyphemus arose, devoured 2 more of the men, rolled away the stone, and set out to pasture his flock, replacing the stone behind him. While he was gone, Odysseus and his men discovered a massive bar of wood, which Polyphemus used for a staff. They sharpened one end and concealed it under the straw of the floor of the cave. When Polyphemus returned, he devoured 2 more men. After his dinner, Odysseus approached him and offered him a bowl of wine, which he accepted, and thoroughly enjoying it, asked for more. Odysseus filled his request several times. Polyphemus was so pleased with the wine that he promised Odysseus that he would be the last to be devoured, and asked his name. Odysseus replied, "I am no man." In Greek, Odysseus is a pun on the name Odysseus. Polyphemus sank into a drunken stupor. Odysseus and his men heated the end of the sharpened stake in the fire until it glowed red hot, then thrust it into the giant's single eye and concealed themselves in the cave. The monster's cries attracted the attention of the other Cyclopses living on the island, and they came to his cave inquiring what all the noise was about. Polyphemus answered, "I have been blinded by no man." His friends responded that if no man did it, it must have been the gods who did it. So Polyphemus would simply have to bear his suffering. They returned to their own caves. The next morning, Polyphemus rolled away the stone and stood outside the entrance, meaning to feel all who exited to assure that the men did not escape. Odysseus and his men strapped themselves to the undersides of the sheep and so escaped. Once outside the cave, they drove the sheep to their boats and set sail. References: Bullfinch Thomas, The Age of Fable. Graves Robert, The Greek Myths. Leon F., Greek Mythology. Homer, The Odyssey. Ovid, Metamorphoses. Zimmerman, Dictionary of Classical Mythology. Gnostic Saint Publius Vergilius Maro, also known as Virgil or Virgil, a poet of Rome under the Emperor Augustus. Virgil was the author of 2 collections of scholarly, beautiful, and prophetic poems, the Eclogues and the Georgics, but was most famous for the great epic, the Aeneid, an account of the wanderings of the Trojan prince Aeneas after the Trojan War. Virgil was born in northern Italy, grew up on his father's farm, and was educated at Cremona, Milan, Rome, and Naples. Aeneas, after having escaped the destruction of Troy with a number of his followers, was informed by the oracle of Apollo that his destiny was to found a new country which would hold sway over all others. In a dream, Aeneas was told to seek Hesperia, Italy, a western land from which the founder of the Trojan race had originally migrated. In pursuit of his high destiny, he was challenged by many obstacles, hardships, setbacks, and temptations, including a famous love affair with Dido, queen and founder of the Phoenician colony of Carthage. The OTO lives in Hesperia, Gala ABHS, but he persisted with honor and determination through them all for the sake of fulfilling what he knew to be his true purpose. His journeys included a descent into Avernus, even Averroes, the underworld, and to Elysium, the blessed abode, and his return therefrom to Hesperia, where he ultimately became the progenitor of Rome. References: Bullfinch Thomas, The Age of Fable, Ovid, Metamorphoses. And our last saint in our series, Gaius Valerius Catullus, the first great Roman lyric poet, noted for his sincere, elegant, and passionate eroticism, the model for the medieval tradition of the art of courtly love. One of the great influences on Crowley, the lyric poet, Catullus was born into a wealthy family of Celtic descent in the town of Verona in Cisalpine Gaul. Jaul. His father was a friend of Julius Caesar, or the Gaulian Kaiser, and sent his young son to Rome to learn the ways of the city. He was noticed by one Claudia Metelli, a married woman 10 years his senior. They embarked upon a tempestuous love affair, which provided the material for most of Catullus' poetry. The poems to Lesbia, written in the style of Sappho, chronicles the affair from flirtation through passion to bitter betrayal. Catullus is also noted for two wedding songs written for his friends, a poetic description of an initiation into the dark rites of Cybele, the Magna Mater or Bonade, whose cult was popular in Julian Rome, several elegies, a hymn to the goddess Diana, a miniature epic of the marriage of Peleus and Thetis, and numerous satiric epigrams on the follies and crudities of his Roman contemporaries. The poems of Catullus are known to us through a single manuscript found in his home town of Verona. Ein. Nulli se decit, mulier mea nubere mali, qua mihi, non si se eopator ipsi petat, non si se eopator ipsi petat, non si se eopator ipsi petat, decit, sed mulier cupido, quod decit amanti, in ventu et rapida, scribere oportet aqua. The woman says she'd rather marry me than anyone, even should Jupiter himself come calling. This is what she says. But what a woman tells to her lover in desire might as well be written on air and running water. Fihi, odi et amo, quare id faciem, vertasse requeres, nisio sed fieri, sentio et excruciare. Mystery of Mystery, a primer of Thelemic Ecclesiastical Gnosticism, author Sabazius 10, USGL of OTO, and Thal Helena. Part 3, Portraits of the Saints of the Gnostic Catholic Church, additional names included in the list of saints by Theodore Rus. The list of saints included in Theodore Rus's 1920 Common Era German translation of the Gnostic Mass includes 4 names which are not found in the standard list: Dante Alighieri, Ludwig von Fischer, Dr. Franz Hartmann, and Charles Detroit. Of these 4, all but Charles Detroit are included in the list of members of the constituent originating assemblies of OTO, published in Book 52, the Manifesto of the OTO. The name Ludwig von Fischer was actually included in Crowley's original list of saints in the version of the Gnostic Mass published in the International in 1918 Error Vulgar, but was dropped from subsequent versions. Dante Alighieri, 1265 to 1321 of the Common Era, the greatest of Italian poets and one of the half-dozen greatest writers of all times. His works alone established Italian as a literary language. His most important work was Commedia, first published 1472, which later became known as Divine Commedia, the Divine Comedy. The Divine Comedy is one of the greatest literary masterpieces of history, a true foundation stone of Western culture, and nothing else needs to be said of it here. Dante's other works include Vita Nuova, circa 1300, first published 1576, De Monarchia, 1313, first published 1559, Convito, first published 1490, and De Vogari Eloquentia, first published 1529. References: Benton William, publisher, Encyclopedia Britannica, 1768-1973. Ludwig von Fischer. The name is obscure. There are a number of individuals in the historical record with this name, with or without the von, none of whom seem to have a clear claim to esoteric sainthood. This would explain Crowley's deletion of the name from his list of saints after 1918 of the Common Era. The name was probably included initially at Roos's request. A list of some of the more plausible candidates follows: Ludwig Eberhard Fischer, 1695 to 1773 of the Common Era, was a theologian and minor German statesman. Ludwig Johann Ignaz Fischer, 1745 to 1825 of the Common Era, was a member of Mozart's entourage and the greatest bass singer of his time. Roos was at one time a member of Richard Wagner's operatic entourage. He may have been a Masonic brother of Mozart as well. The part of Osman in the abduction from Seraglio was written for Fischer. Ludwig von Fischer, 1828 to 1907, was a professor of botany in Bern, Switzerland. His son, Ludwig Edward, 1868 to 1939, followed in his father's footsteps and became an influential botanist. Ludwig Fischer, born 1867, is or was the philosopher who wrote the book Die Naturische Ordnung unseres Denkens, Leipzig 1927, translated into English as The Structure of Thought, A Survey of Natural Philosophy, London 1931. Ludwig Fischer was also the name of Burgermeister of Augsburg during Roos's youth there, who in 1898 provided Roos with a character reference for his service as a war correspondent. References: Historischen Kommission bei der Königlichen Akademie der Wissenschaften allgemein, Deutsche Biographie, Dunker and Humboldt, Leipzig, 1879. Same again, 1961, but Berlin Publishing House. And Müller, Helmut and Elik Hau, Merlin Peregrinus, von Untergrund des Abendlandes, Konighausen and Neumann, Würzburg, 1986. Franz Hartmann. Franz Hartmann was a Bavarian-American physician, occultist, and one of the co-founders of OTO, along with Karl Kellner, Theodore Roos, Henry Klein, and Charles Detroit. He served in the Bavarian artillery in his youth and then studied medicine and became a physician. He immigrated to America in 1865, obtained U.S. citizenship, and qualified as an MD. He traveled as a doctor to various cities and served for a time as coroner in Georgetown, Colorado, during his travels. He visited a number of Indian tribes. and researched their religious beliefs. He developed an interest in spiritualism and became active in the spiritualist circles of New Orleans. He joined the Theosophical Society in 1882, and in 1883 he was invited by Colonel Olcott to come to the TS headquarters in Adyar, India. He remained in Adyar until 1885 and was appointed to the 8-member governing board of the TS headquarters. During his stay, Hartman allegedly received up to 10 personal letters from the Mahatmas. While Blavatsky and Olcott were away in Europe in 1884, the Society for Psychical Research came to Adyar to investigate the claims of psychic phenomena. The report was unfavorable, and Hartman became enmeshed in the internal politics which resulted. Hartman left Adyar in 1885 and returned to Bavaria, where he met Karl Kellner. He and Kellner collaborated on the development of the lignosulfide inhalation therapy for tuberculosis, and Hartman established a sanitarium near Salzburg to administer this novel treatment technique. While in Austria, he became increasingly involved in the Viennese Theosophical Circle, centered around Friedrich Eckstein, where he may have had his first contact with Theodor Reuss. Through contact in the Eckstein group, he was introduced to the elderly Austrian weaver, name unknown, who claimed to be a lineal Rosicrucian initiate and became this man's disciple. In 1902, Hartman assisted Reuss in obtaining warrants from John Yarker to form a sovereign sanctuary in Germany for the Masonic rites of Memphis and Mizraim, and to form a German Grand Orient for the Cernau Council Scottish Rite. Hartman initially held offices in both the Sovereign Sanctuary and the Grand Orient. In 1906, Reuss combined the two organizations under the umbrella of Kellner's Ordo Templi Orientis, and Hartman was given the title of Honorary Grand Master of the Sovereign Sanctuary. Hartman was one of the most prolific writers on occultism of his time, and was the author of The Life and Doctrines of Paracelsus, 1887, An Adventure Among the Rosicrucians, 1887, Magic, White and Black, 1888, The Principles of Astrological Geomancy, 1889, and The Pronaos of the Temple of Wisdom, 1890, The Talking Image of Urur, 1890, The Life and Doctrines of Jacob Boehm, 1891, Occult Science and Medicine, 1893, Among the Gnomes, 1895, The Life of Yeshua, 1909, The Secret Symbols of the Rosicrucians, which is included 1888, which is included in Section 1 of the AA reading list. References: Blavatsky, Helena P. Letter to William Quan, Judge, dated 1 May 1885, published in Theosophical History, Volume 5, Number 2, April 1994, with notes by Michael Gomes. Hal Ehrlich, Theodor Reuss, Irregular Freemasonry in Germany, 1900 to 23, and Ars Cultur Coronati, February 1978, Reuss Theodor, Ordens Bekannt Mach Ungen, in Oriflamme, Berlin and London, December 1910. Reuss Theodor, Unser Orden, in Oriflamme, Jubiläums Ausgabe, Ludwigshausen, 1912. Shepard, Leslie, editor, Encyclopedia of Occultism and Parapsychology, 2nd edition, Gale Research Co., Detroit, Michigan, 1984. Webb, James, The Occult Establishment, Library Press, LaSalle, Illinois, 1976. Charles Detre, D-E-T-R-E, 1855 to 1918, of the Common Era. Teeter, 33 degrees, 90 degrees, 95 degrees, IX, or 9 degree, was Reuss's primary co-worker in France and another co-founder of OTO when Pappus died in 1916, Detroit succeeded briefly to the leadership of the Martinist order and the French sections of the Rite of Memphis and Misraim, the Kabbalistic order of the Rose Croix, and the OTO. References: Laban, Rudolf Laban, de Alliance Internationale de la Dames de la Rose Croix, pamphlet 1918, Les Forestiers Rennais, Le Occultisme en France, Ox 19 m et 20 m cycles, Les Anglices Gnostiques, ouvrage inédit publié par Antoine Favre, Archie Milano, 1990, Molière, Opsit. Finally, James Wasserman, who died the 18th of November, 2020, of the Ereville goddess, possibly of the plague called COVID-19. This is after Cairo 116 VVI, and his creed may have been Ismaili.